Welcome to Mainland Television Regional News. I'm Graham O'Brien, and in today's news, Grey Power struggles continue, 20-year birthday for Trust, and thumbs up for Children's Day event, and much more. Today we are left wondering who really are the rebels within Grey Power. Mainland was informed by an unnamed source on the weekend that on Saturday morning, 3 police officers attended a situation outside of Grey Power Nelson's HQ in Stoke when Rollo's locksmith arrived to change the locks on behalf of Grey Power President Neville Mayle. However, it appears that police prevented the change of locks after a female office worker was inside the building when the locksmiths arrived. According to our source, one of the 4 upheld complaints that led to Mayle having his position cancelled and then his membership pulled was after a Grey Power office worker signed an affidavit to say Neville Mayle had asked her to take Kevin Gardner off the membership list for the AGM after the list had been closed. But this is not the first time that questions have been asked over memberships and positions being pulled within the whole organisation. Mainland understands that within the national body this could also be a culture that should be questioned, after a Nelson Grey Power representative on the national body, who does not wish to be named, had his membership pulled by the national organisation after he spoke out about his concerns over the way the national body conducted business. Neville Mayle has also been responsible for axing a membership, that of Councillor Ian Barker, for attending a Meet the Candidates meeting wearing a screen mask in protest against the fact that only certain political candidates had been invited to speak to members. We went to the streets of Stoke to ask members their views on the current situation at Grey Power. Are you aware of all the issues that are going on at Grey Power at the moment, and how do you feel about that as a member?
Seems to be the committee is at odds with everybody else.
The politics of it doesn't really impress me very much. There's a few trying to get to the top, and that's fine. So I just take what they hand out and go along with what I enjoy.
They probably do need a little bit of guidance. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? Things have gone astray. Yeah. Sounds to me as though there's a lot of different personalities in there that are clashing, and they're just not seeing eye to eye.
I worked with Neville Mayle in the Rugby World Cup and found him very easy to get along with, and can't see what he might have done wrong in this, but obviously some people think he has.
I just think there's just not enough spoken to the public about it, to us members. We feel a bit cut off. And I know, literally locked out. I know a close friend of mine feels very much the same way. We've been discussing it and thinking, well, yes, there should be more openness about, what is going on, who's done what, if anything, etc. We just don't know what's happening. And, we pay our fees, and yes, they do help, in certain cases when you're buying products and so on. And I've got the Grey Power power now, I've gone that way too, so yes, it's a thumbs up for that one too. But yes, it would be nice to know more what's going on, literally.
Do you feel that the national body should step in and provide a bit of guidance, or should the members just be left to their own devices and sort it out locally?
Yes, something needs to be done, to be honest. Yeah, it would be a good idea. Yeah.
I think we're big enough and old enough to do it ourselves. And it's not going to change until the AGM happens, and whether the people who are objecting to Neville will be elected or whether Neville will be put back, that's in our hands to sort out at the AGM.
Tasman District Council is throwing its weight into the Children's Day this year, which is coming up on Sunday 1st of March. The plan is to offer interactive fun at Rabbit Island beginning from 2 p.m. until 4 p.m. at the western end of Conifer Park. Council are providing lots of kids' activities free of charge, including a treasure hunt to finish the day off. Bikes will also be a theme for the day, with trails set up by the Get Moving Family Fun Ride team, and a bike mechanic will be available to check bikes over for safety. The focus of this year's Children's Day is treasuring our children, with a range of children's events across the country. The first Children's Day took place in the year 2000 and has become a well-established event ever since. This event at Rabbit Island will be cancelled if wet. In the news recently, the RMA changes have been a hot topic as a way to save money on a new build and speed up the process of building affordable housing. We had Mayor Rees in our studio to talk about these changes and how this impacts on council revenue and the effects it may have for the local residents. You're mentioned in the Nick Smith's speech as being helping in writing the report on the Purpose and Principles Act and the RMA.
Right.
So from what I read, and it was quite a difficult speech to read, the RMA will save between 15,000 on the sale of a house or on building a house. How will that affect the revenue of council? I mean, will that 15,000 come out of council completely, and then what will happen to that?
Well, look, I think one of the things with the Resource Management Act is that it's integral to a lot of the work that we do. So it's not just around residential housing, it's around our stormwater, our flood protection, around natural hazards. There's all sorts of things that the Resource Management Act is used for in terms of looking after our environment. I did some work a few years ago looking at the principles of the Resource Management Act in a technical advisory group role, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the Minister has drafted. One of the things that I think is going to be very positive is that he signalled the opportunity for councils to use collaborative processes in their rule making, so their plan making, their policies. And if we move in that direction, then and we have a consensus, then we may then have the opportunity where we don't have appeals to the Environment Court. And I actually think, if I'm thinking about what will save this community a lot of money, it will be using that sort of process, because the dollars involved in Resource Management Act and resource management processes, an awful lot of them go to lawyers. And an awful lot of time is used waiting until we get to the end of the process, both from a council point of view, and that actually costs the ratepayers. So we charge fees for resource consent, so your consents for earthworks or a discharge consent, but we don't recover all of that cost from the person who applies, because there's a public good element to it. So if we're looking after the air, that's why we've got the rules, then that's for the benefit of the whole community. So you as a ratepayer pay a proportion of the cost of managing that resource. Graham, I'd love to say that what we're going to see out of this is, for every homeowner, they're going to see X percentage reduction in the cost of building a house. And I think we can see some savings there if we have some consistency across the country. I think that's really important. I think having a different technical standard for earthworks in Nelson compared to Otago compared to somewhere else, we can tidy some of that out and have some national consistency across the whole with those standards. But we don't want to lose the local flavour.
No, I mean that's right. And if we just carry on this. I mean, for an example, you know, the people on Waimea Road here, they can't build a fence over 1.2 because of the interaction between the road and the property, which quite frankly, they don't want to interact with 30,000 cars a day.
Nice.
But
I understand that.
But however, we have the project, the building down by the cathedral, who has used the outside wall, which is basically looks like a concrete bomb shelter, which is not in keeping with that area whatsoever, yet they got the consent process put through. And I mean, we just feel that these laws may be letting that more go on, especially with all the money that's coming in and maybe the millionaires who are moving here.
Well, I think you might have a personal view about different types of development, and you know that might be your view around that development. I think what I look at is, I think when we're building our planning documents, you know, one of the pieces of feedback that I do get fairly consistently is, and it's not around residential development. It's around those key sites within the city where we have 2-storey, 3-storey high blank walls. Well, actually, we've resolved some of those by doing some fantastic urban art. You know, so we've actually made some great steps on that. But I think if you took the fencing rule, I mean, you might recall that I wasn't a great fan of that fencing rule because I've lived on a really busy road not very far from here as well, and my fence was actually, I needed it to give me a buffer from the traffic that was going past. And you can say, well, all you need to do is apply for a consent. But that, when you're trying to build a fence, you know, and you spend as much on getting the consent as you do on the fence or more, there's something wrong with that. So, look, I am in favour of having fewer rules, but actually more meaningful, gutsy rules that are going to define the community the way we want. And it is about the things that are really important. We tend to, I think, I think the resource management plans that we're dealing with at the moment, and they're quite old now, you know, because they take a long time to develop. You know, they're 10, 15 years old, some of them around New Zealand. They they're not necessarily keeping pace with what the expectations are of a community now, and they're kind of focused on a micro level of going through rules at a level where I actually think you're better off talking about the kind of place you want this to be, rather than trying to prescribe everything with a rule, and you use the rules for the things that really matter.
With the cost of consents being so high and the ratepayer still having to subsidise the process, even for a domestic fence it seems, the question still needs to be answered: how much more will it cost the ratepayer if the new RMA laws are introduced? This weekend saw Altrusa House Trust celebrate its 20th birthday with a Saturday night out for the Nelson Branch volunteers. Nationally, each club develops a program that is tailored to local needs, undertaking a variety of service, literacy and fundraising projects each year. Altrusa took out the 2007 Supreme Prize at the Trustpower Nelson Tasman Community Awards for their Magic Mums program, which was funded through surplus funds from the Trust. The award was given to the Trust for taking 10 mothers who are caregivers for children with disabilities or special needs and treating them to a weekend of pampering. Last Friday was a busy time for our rescue helicopter, which responded to 2 rescue missions. The first call-out began Friday morning to rescue a driver of a small rental truck. The driver was found clinging to a tree after crashing his vehicle in the lower Buller Gorge in the early hours of Friday morning. The alarm was raised around 5 a.m. after people at Berlin's Camp and Cafe heard a man's cries for help. An upturned truck was located wedged in the trees down a bank. The man had been swept about 200 metres downstream. Rescuers abseiled to the man and remained with him until the Nelson Tasman rescue helicopter arrived and transported him to Westport Hospital for medical treatment. Meanwhile, later Friday evening, the helicopter rescue service was sent to help 2 men in a suspected sea rescue mission near Kahurangi Point Lighthouse off the west coast of Golden Bay around 8 p.m. after the boat's emergency locator beacon had been activated. The 2 men from Westport were located after their 7-metre boat had been overturned by waves and smashed onto rocks off the coast of Kahurangi Point Lighthouse. They were found after making it to land, cold, wet and suffering lacerations. The helicopter landed on the shoreline and the pair were flown to Nelson Hospital Emergency Department for treatment. Social media has spread the word about the gondola video that Gary Milbank has created to preview the proposed Fringe Hill gondola in the Brook Valley. This proposal has cost ratepayers $15,000 already for a feasibility study for this proposal, which would offer a 620-metre vertical lift to the heart of a world-class mountain bike network, including the Dun Mountain Trail, all just 5 kilometres from the heart of Nelson City. Joe Rainey, brother of Nelson City Councillor Pete Rainey, is driving this project as spokesman for the Nelson Cycle Lift Society Incorporated, which aims to have a gondola lift built on council land in the Brook Valley to near the top of Fringe Hill. A restaurant and cafe plus bike hire were also planned with it, all adding up to an estimated cost of $8.7 million according to the feasibility study. The organisation's spokesman Joe Rainey has said that the project stood to become a world-class attraction for a new type of tourism. We leave you now with the rest of the proposed gondola video. After the break, we'll bring you the latest weather update and some events and happenings coming up from around the region.